Welcome to the Disrupt Now podcast, episode 61.
Create the highest, grandest vision possible for your life because you become what you believe.
What makes people excited is progress. You don't have to be at the goal yet to feel alive again. You have to make progress.
Just do right. Right may not be expedient. It may not be profitable, but it will satisfy your soul.
What matters most is finding your inner purpose.
Disrupt Now, a coaching program and a podcast designed by entrepreneur and visionary Natalie Viglione. In this podcast, we bring together disruptors and life game changers that will help empower you to disrupt status quo in order to progress you towards the ultimate vision you have of your life. We'll explore alternative topics with our guests whom are global healers, meditation gurus, transformational life teachers and coaches, women entrepreneurs that are fighting to make this world a better place, and people in general that are disrupting industries from education, fashion, technology, art, health, and much more. Please join us on this journey to move humanity to a much higher level of consciousness and create more mindful conversations.
Hi, welcome to the Disrupt Now podcast. This is an exciting episode today. We are focused on true health, and I have an amazing guest with me as always, but this is such an amazing topic near and dear to my heart. It's something that I live in every day, I feel like, and I am so excited to dive in. So let me introduce the guest today, David Krantz. He is a certified epigenetic coach and a sought-after expert in the field of individualized nutrition and peak performance. As a lifelong musician, David sees the various systems of the body as parts of a complex symphony, and as a coach, he excels at helping clients fine-tune those parts to create harmonious health and harness their creative and personal power. David is best known for developing a genetic test that helps people understand their unique response to cannabinoids and was nominated in 2019 as the top 100 health innovator by the International Forum for Healthcare Advancement. David, welcome and congratulations on that award.
Thank you, Natalie. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today and hopefully giving your audience some things to think about.
Yes. And we talk about things to think about. Like, we're going to go deep, like inside the body, deep, deep, deep. And I have to share that. So I've learned about the topics we're going to dive in today, which really wraps around epigenetics and going even, a little bit deeper here and talking about nutrigenetics. But I was really introduced to this big time a couple years ago when I hit some major health issues as I moved on into my 40s. And it was surprising, shocking. And little did I know, because little are we taught, how not that our genes define who we are, but how we can define our genes through environmental and physical and spiritual and emotional elements that drive our life. So this seriously is just speaking to my soul in terms of people need to know this. I'm so glad you exist.
I love the way you just framed that we define our genes rather than them defining us. And, there's a little bit of both, but it's really that interplay that is what's so important. And you're right. I think if more people understood the control and influence that we have over our genetic expression, the way we think about our health would be very different. And what we do would be very much tied into our health state, into our health potential. And, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this with someone like yourself who understands this and spread this to a wider audience.
Yes. I think that if we were empowered with this insight, basically at birth, imagine how our lives would change. I mean, we wouldn't have surprise you're in your 40s crap that happens, or, or whatever age. I mean, we wouldn't have as many surprises because we'd understand. We can understand how to take care of our outside, the skin and things of that nature, and exercise, which is inside too. But we have this physical. We're always looking at this part. Rarely are we going on the inside and thinking about everything that actually runs our body, and that is, I think, something that is massively missing from our educational system, and that's a whole other topic. But let's talk about your journey getting to where you are today. And I, had dove into all the information and really getting to know who you are, and that you became a certified epigenetic coach after your lifestyle made you kind of, well, crash and burn. And then you had to learn how to heal from that. So let's start there, because I think that's super interesting, because it also talks about how these inopportune, horrific experiences can lead to amazing things.
Absolutely. So I, like many other people that find themselves in a helping or healing position, had to really figure out my own stuff first.
Yeah.
And, the Chinese character for crisis also means opportunity, right? They're the same symbol for these two things. And I think in my own life, I'm lucky to have been able to frame my health crisis as an opportunity. And I didn't really see it like that then, but when I look back, the things that I learned are really what have allowed me to, create a career of helping people figure this stuff out for themselves. And so,
Right.
yeah, like you mentioned, my background is in music. I've been a musician my whole life. And in, late teens, early 20s, I got into producing electronic music and had a pretty successful project and was touring around the country and staying up late, sometimes till 4 or 5 in the morning, playing gigs or writing shows. And
I was probably there watching you at some point, because totally into that. So yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm still embedded in that world to some degree, but I just don't take very many late night gigs anymore, actually. And actually the live streaming that's been happening since COVID has been great, because now I get to catch my favorite artists at normal times. It's kind of a perverse blessing in a way. There's a lot of terrible things to it, but I'll take that as a positive.
Exactly.
So yeah, I was not taking good care of my body. I had never really thought about what I was eating. I was just coasting from what I had learned from my family, which when I look back, wasn't terrible food, but, I would eat fast food when it was convenient.
Sure.
I loved bread and cheese and just the typical American kind of way of eating.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a position where I started having these really weird health problems crop up. I was passing out randomly, like I would lose consciousness. And the peak of this was I was having breakfast with a friend in a restaurant, and I woke up on the floor and my 2 front teeth had been smashed out of my mouth because I had just passed out and landed on the floor. And that was a real wake up call. And I had I went to see some cardiologists and other doctors to try and figure out what was going on. And all of them, I actually had a small heart monitor implanted in my chest for 6 months to make sure that I didn't have any. Right. And the conclusion was, well, you're pretty healthy. There's not much we're going to do for you. Right. And I'm like, well, okay, clearly you're not looking at the whole picture. I get that you think I'm not going to die from a heart attack. That's great. Nice to know.
Sure.
But
we ruled out one thing. We can cross one thing off the list.
Right. Yeah. So, but it clearly wasn't the whole picture. And I got really into the biohacking world, really into the mindset of, okay, how can I take control over what's going on in my body? Because clearly there's something that's out of balance. And I just started throwing everything, doing the whole kitchen sink routine, right? Everything that I could think of and learn about, I started doing, and it started to help a lot. I really changed my diet, started to exercise again, got deeper into yoga and meditation, which I had been doing, but not in a way that would balance out being up till 5 in the morning and having a super wacky sleep schedule. And, really started taking care of my emotional health. too at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And what was fascinating to me is that as I turned my brain on, right? Like all of a sudden I have this cognitive ability that I didn't have before. I was able to
Mm-hmm.
actually do inner emotional healing work that I had never even realized was a problem before, because all of a sudden I was more aware of what was happening for me. And so I started this journey of, self-development, emotional healing, self-awareness in combination with really radically changing what I was putting in my body and how I was treating it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the universe said, hey, here's an opportunity. And this really interesting synchronicity happened where I had been listening to this podcast for a couple months, and I had just absorbed every episode of it that I could. It was with this doctor named Dan Stickler, who was this expert in genetics and nutrigenetics. And, there were maybe about 50, 60 episodes of this podcast that I had found. And I just went, I need to know everything about this. Like no one else is really talking about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking a walk on my lunch break at work and realized that the logo of the podcast was actually on the building next door.
Oh,
And
what?
I realized that this doctor that I'd been listening to every word he had spoken for the past couple months had an office literally next door to me. And so, of course, I wanted to initially just make an appointment with him to get some blood work done and work with him and see how, if he could further my own journey. And it turned out when I met with him that they were actually looking to hire someone who had an expertise in audio engineering and music production, because they had built this experimental sound chamber in the clinic where they were trying to, invoke altered states and meditative states, and needed someone to really help develop the music and programming for it. And of course, I took that job immediately and started working with them. And not too long after that, Dr. Stickler was starting to develop this training program for other coaches and practitioners to teach his method of genetics and epigenetics. And I was just kind of in the right place at the right time. I didn't really consider myself a practitioner at all at that point. The thought of me being a coach was kind of absurd. Like I was an artist, I was, a musician, just didn't really see myself in that role. But he really saw some potential in me and kind of nudged me and was like, hey, you should, let me test this out on you, come be part of the beta testing program. And I actually said no at first. I was like, I don't think so. And, over time, he convinced me, and I did. And it turned out that I had a pretty natural aptitude to understand this information. And I had a good background of all the stuff I had figured out on my own. And I ended up training with him like several times as he was developing the course content. And now he's gone on to train a couple hundred international coaches. And I happened to be the very first one that he trained. So I was just
that is awesome.
Right. So I was just in the right place at the right time to kind of be handed the keys to the kingdom by someone who was looking to mentor someone. And I ended up, just finding a really good mentor accidentally, and started working with people pretty cautiously at first, thinking, can I really help people? Is this really part of what I'm here to do? And it turned out I really loved it. Right. And I really loved the process of getting to know someone, getting to know their body, getting to know what drives them and what health means for them, and using personalized genetic information and testing to really help them get to the next level of health in the same way that I did. And
Right.
so that's been my journey the past 5 or 6 years since that weird synchronicity happened. And here I am today.
That is awesome. Isn't that interesting when the universe opens up these doors? And I mean, I can't believe it was literally almost next door to you. That's crazy. That's very crazy, but it makes so much sense when you look at the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
Purpose is crazy.
Yeah. And sometimes I think about, what would have happened if I hadn't followed my intuition to just go walk in and make an appointment right then and go, wow, okay, this is next door. Clearly I got to follow up on this, and I think that's
Exactly.
one of the things that when we look at what the overall influences on health, it's really that sense of being connected, being part of something larger that can really open up doors. and really following through on those gut feelings and instincts. And we can talk about some of the physiology of that too, if you want, because I think it's pretty interesting.
I do too. And I believe in that wholeheartedly, because I will share briefly that it's been very interesting, but my journey in trying to understand what the hell was happening to me, like I started going some traditional routes and very soon realized they just don't have the training and education that's desired for understanding health on such a deep level, to understand, like, we need to sometimes go back to how we were born, what we were born with, the conditions in which we were born with, things that we're carrying from past situations potentially, which I think is also part of this conversation as well. But when you go into all of those things and you start learning about how deeply connected everything is in your life and how it compounds over time. And I've got asked this question a million times, well, why, how did you not really know you were sick for so long? From my perspective, I have an IgA deficiency, which opened up my body for the capability for toxins to get inside and destroy my gut health. Mold illness is a part of this, and a pathogen state of H. pylori is opportunistic to grow. So now I'm having to get these toxins out of my body, which is such a long, arduous process. And a big piece of this was understanding my genes, understanding, nutrigenetics, and we should get into that too. But it's just fascinating because people ask, well, why all of a sudden? Like, why did this just express itself? Like, you're having breakfast, you're eating, and all of a sudden you're on a floor. Why? Because it's our bodies, and it can only take so much. And if we don't know what's happening on the inside, this is part of the problem, because it expresses itself at some point. And I think that this is why this is so, like, what you're teaching and what you're doing is so imperative to people's health, because the first sign of heart disease is what? Right? Like, there is no sign of heart disease. It can lead to death, and you don't even, like, people don't even understand what the hell happened to a person. So there's this is where heart attacks come into so many things. And so if we don't understand what's happening, then this stuff evolves and just grows, and it just is we think it's part of our experience as being human. But I would dare say, and I know that you believe this too, that is absolutely not how it has to go.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about there is really thresholds, right? These thresholds that we cross when all of a sudden low level underlying dysfunction becomes something that's all of a sudden noticeable, all of a sudden passing out, all of a sudden, having a serious disease state where it's affecting you. And the phases, the phase that precedes that is this sort of slow, less noticeable decline where there's nothing extreme to really wake you up. There's nothing really major that's gonna say, hey, like, you really got to pay attention to this. It's just going to be this sense of, I feel fine, I feel okay. And the opposite of that, and I don't like the word preventative. I don't like that notion of looking at things and doing health things so you can prevent disease. I mean, sure, that's part of it, but when you're focusing on taking your health to a higher level now and just feeling as good as you possibly can and functioning as high as you possibly can, inherently the quote unquote prevention comes along with it. But where you focus your attention, if you're just focused on saying, well, I don't want to get a heart attack, well, that doesn't really give you much room to grow. That gives you room to prevent, but there's not much there to say, well, what's the potential, what's the possibilities that I can get to right now. And, I look at this, I like to call these health horizons, where, when you're looking over the horizon, you can't actually see what's beyond the horizon until you get there. And then you have this whole next field of vision that allows you to say, oh, this was over the horizon. And health is very much like that, where I didn't know until I started doing all these, diet practices and supplements and, daily energy routines and things like that. I didn't know that my brain could function at a higher level. Like I'd always been pretty smart, but I wasn't able to sit there and concentrate for hours on end in the way that I can now. And I wasn't able to ask my body to perform at as high a level as it can now.
Right.
And I would never have known had I not taken that step to try it. But that's the thing as a practitioner, that when someone comes to me and says, I'm at this level right now, they might not know that they're capable. If you're listening to this, you might not know that you're capable of performing and functioning and living at a higher, more in tune, more energetic, more fully balanced kind of level. But as a coach, I know that's possible. So that's what I really enjoy is really bringing that out for people.
Exactly. So, and I love that health horizons, because that is more than true. And it really is about discovering what's possible. What is possible? I think we've gotten really stuck in this. I feel okay.
Yeah. And those are thresholds too. We're talking about these thresholds that you can go downward, right? And you can get into the disease state. That's the unbalanced state. And you can come back into like kind of a relatively balanced state that where you're like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm kind of average. I feel like, my mom said I was supposed to feel kind of tired all the time when I get home from work, or whatever the social norms are. And there's a lot of programming and a lot of shame that is actually embedded in moving outside of the common allowable sense of what's okay to how it's okay to feel. You're kind of in the society right now, you're supposed to kind of feel tired and shitty and not really that great. Like that's something that you can commiserate with other people about and complain to other people about. It's easy to connect over that. And it actually takes more energy to emotionally put yourself in a place where you feel really good, because all of a sudden the people around you might say, what happened to him? Like now I feel bad because he feels better than I do. And there's this game that gets played socially or in families. And you see this all the time when someone wants to make health changes. It's often the people around them that are uncomfortable with it, because it all of a sudden shines a light on the areas where they feel like they can't improve. And so, it's a whole system to unravel there. But knowing that, hey, there's thresholds that you can move beyond. There's initiatory steps that can happen in health that allow you to look back and go, wow, I actually was not living at my, fullest, my peak at all. And I kind of look at it, as this sort of unreachable asymptote, right? Like the unreachable infinity, where like, potential is limitless. You can never fully get there, but you can at least have these levels that you can operate at and kind of know when you're in one or the other, and set those for yourself, and really decide for yourself where you want those to be, and not let the other people around you or your culture decide that for you.
Or like we're going to talk about, because I think we should, let's get into epigenetics and nutrigenetics at the level of how you teach people what they are, and the importance of these concepts, because I think that what we also can get dictated by, and I hear this a lot, is, oh, well, I have the cancer genes, so I should I should just set myself up now for the fact that I'm going to have it. And as we know, that is total BS. And that, for the most part, there are very few genes that can dictate and express in that manner, as we know. And that's a fact. That's scientific proof at this point. So let's get into those things a little bit, because I think there's a lot of people that aren't familiar with this yet. And we can work from that basis moving forward.
Sure. So let's define epigenetics first for your audience. I think that might be a good place to start.
Yep.
So when I was in high school biology class and we were learning about DNA, we learned the central dogma of biology, which is genes code for proteins, which code for traits. And this is what was believed to be the dogma, the truth for many, many years since DNA was discovered, up until the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And this is the idea that your genes create your traits, they create your biological destiny, they create your diseases. They're the I have the cancer gene or I have the depression gene fatalistic mentality. And what science has discovered in the past 25, really the last 15 years or so, there's been kind of the revolution in understanding. What has really been uncovered is that that is only a small piece of the equation. And there's another layer of influence or control over those traits, over those disease states, over how you feel on a daily basis. That is not just your base genetic code. It's not just the amino acid sequence that causes this. There is this other layer called epigenetics that will change the way these genes express in response to the environment. And the key word is in response to the environment. And I use the word environment to mean basically everything that your body encounters, your external environment, your internal environment, all of the things that go into creating the sum total of what your body is exposed to. So that could be nutrition, that could be, getting sleep or not getting sleep. That could be the light that you're being exposed to on a daily basis. That could be supplements you're taking, exercise you're doing. That could be products you're putting on your skin or toxins you're taking in from your environment. That could be emotions and relationships and things that cause hormonal responses or different neurotransmitter responses. And because we know that different emotions have physiological, biological correlates to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're angry, you have a different set of biochemical reactions happening in your body than when you're blissful and joyful. And though all of those things have scientifically been shown to change genetic expression. And so the idea that I have the cancer gene or I have the depression gene is so outdated, right? This is what they thought they were going to find in the 70s and 80s. And when we mapped the human genome in the early 2000s, for the first couple of years, scientists were still looking for the depression gene or the cancer gene. And they realized, oh, this is so much more complex. There's definitely not one gene. Maybe we can find like a couple hundred genes that actually do this. And they tried to find those and then realize, oh, like this is so much more complex. It's actually the gene environment interaction that matters most. And this means that you can be born with a set of genes that might predispose you to depression. They might predispose you to a higher risk of cancer, but only if you are putting yourself in a particular environmental situation, only if you're exposing yourself to a poor diet and high stress and trauma or whatever it is that is the trigger of those health states.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's on one side of the equation. And then on the other side of the equation, we can look at it from the possibility of these things also being health creating, health promoting. We have the opportunity to change genetic expression in the positive. And what I want to make clear to your audience is your genes still matter. But what you do is more important than what genes you have. But if you know what genetic variants you have, you can consciously choose what inputs you put into your system that will create a positive response, because certain people with certain genetic variants will respond differently to different things better. And this is why we see so many different diets out there, so many different supplements, and some people being super fans of this one type. Like, the vegan approach worked amazing for me. It's got to work for everyone. Paleo approach worked amazing for me. It's got to work for everyone. The keto approach worked amazing for me. It's got to work for you and you and you and you. And you see people get in this mindset that is this sort of dogmatic diet mindset. And what epigenetics and genetics really tells us is that dogmatic thinking about anything like that is totally myopic and missing the bigger picture, because those people just happen to match themselves up with the right environment, with the
Yep.
right inputs to the system. And that's really the key, is understanding how you're wired, what is going to create the best response, and then doing those things. And so that's what I do as a coach, is help people first understand their genetics, understand what are the epigenetic inputs that create positive genetic expression, and then help them implement that. So, that's one facet of epigenetics. And then the other one that you alluded to earlier is this idea that this can also be passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Which has been a huge revelation in science, where they were certain for many, many years that the only way to pass information from parent to offspring was through the genetic code itself. And you may remember from your high school biology class too, this idea of acquired characteristics that was a competing theory for Darwin's theory of evolution. And this guy got laughed out of the university thing at a certain point and said, like, no, like, it doesn't matter what your parents do in your lifetime. Like, it just matters what random natural selection does. Well, in the last 20 years or so, there's really strong scientific evidence that shows what you do in your lifetime can be passed to your children and their children and their children. And the wisdom that indigenous tribes carry, that what you do now will show up 7 generations later, has been absolutely proven to be true. And that means that, if you are eating a crappy diet, you're sitting on the couch and not exercising, and you have a kid, that kid is probably going to be more likely to have heart disease, obesity, diabetes, numerous things that we don't want. But on the flip side, if you are exercising, taking care of your body, and doing the things that promote health for you, that is also passed on. And we can think a bit of it as your body is pretty intelligent, and it wants to prepare the next generation to really be attuned to be able to respond to whatever environment is there, when and before you're pregnant. And this also matters from, the sperm and the male influence as well. This isn't just that
Exactly.
that it's just the person who's pregnant. This is both sides. This is equal attribution. And the body wants to prepare the next generation to work with whatever's there. So if the body is going, oh, I'm getting like 3 bags of Cheetos a day and 4 hours of Netflix and a 30-minute argument,
Soda pop.
yeah, 30-minute argument and work that I really don't like, that I wish I wasn't doing. Well, you're gonna set your offspring up biochemically to have certain adaptations to that, and typically not adaptations that are positive, right? Like, that tends to set people up for things we don't want. But again,
issues. Yeah.
Issues, yeah. And this is scientifically validated stuff in a number of different areas. And then on the flip side, if you do the things that make you feel good, make you move towards that next health horizon, like we talked about, well, then you're sensing that environment and those inputs in a way that will positively influence the next generation. So, epigenetics, it lies at the core of a lot of what we perceive to either be health creating things, health detracting things, right? And how the human species changes and evolves, whether we're moving away from or towards a overall healthier state.
Right. The incredibly really interesting thing that I got to when I started going down the rabbit hole, because once you go down the rabbit holes, there's just no way that you can return back to anything conventional or traditional. It's not possible, because the power in which you you have in learning these things is just incredible. For example, I learned, I mean, I knew this part, but I didn't know, I didn't even think that it could have been created by anything, but I was born 2 months early. So I was a massively premature baby, and it caused all kinds of issues when I was born. So that was very traumatic. And then, recently I've confirmed this, that my father was in Vietnam and he was exposed to Agent Orange. His brother has died from cancer because of Agent Orange. His other brother died of cancer because, I mean, this is real. This is factual. When I started getting into research about Agent Orange, and it's basically glyphosate's cousin, another toxin, and that's a whole other episode in and of itself. But I mean, when you go to that level and you understand how you can literally be born with toxins inside of your body, and it can actually cause birth defects, it can cause these issues before you even come into this onto this planet, whatever. That drives a massive awareness too. Now, something that I think we should hit on, because I think it's absolutely fascinating, is there's this already innate toxin that, okay, now I didn't even know it, but I had to fight that battle my whole life. And little did I know it would show up when I was 40 saying, hello, I'm here. You probably should have known about me about 20 years ago, but because all the things make sense. But let's talk about, because I also think it's this energy too. It's the emotions that are being carried from past generations. And you had hit on this and some of the stuff that we were, corresponding about before this episode. So let's talk about what you were exposed to from an experience standpoint, transmitted, from your past, from previous generations, that until you started this journey, you just kind of really didn't even think had any effect on you.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, what you're describing makes so much sense in terms of there being your dad having a toxic exposure, and, what I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize is it's not just that toxins are directly passed like from tissue to tissue from like being gestated and your mom's womb who may have had some toxins. It's the epigenetic imprint of that from your dad that probably in some ways set you up to be more sensitive to those things. Because when we think about genetics and epigenetics as environmental sensors, like it would make perfect sense biologically for you to be more sensitive to things and give you an ability to get away from things that you don't want to be around, right? Like the heightened sensitivity.
Exactly.
So it just makes a lot of sense. But yeah, my one of the big revelations that I had early on with this was when I was passing out. There's a really good and so this is
which is so scary, by the way.
Right.
Oh, I can't even imagine how you felt.
Yeah, it
like,
was not
and your
fun.
teeth, and I'm like, oh, that's the stuff nightmares are made of, seriously.
Yeah, well, it was nervous system dysfunction. It was vagus nerve not firing correctly, changing the rhythm of my heart to make me think that there was a lion chasing me when there was not. Right. It's that sense of spontaneous biological fear. And my mom's parents were in the Holocaust. My grandfather especially was in several concentration camps. He was actually in Auschwitz when it was liberated. Actually, he actually escaped. I recently reread the story that he wrote about this. But he actually escaped on a death march 2 weeks before the camps were liberated and ran off into the woods with two other friends. Like, he was in it to the fullest extent, and he decided that I'm either going to die some way or I'm going to get shot running away. And he decided to run and met up with some Russian troops, and they brought him back to, I think, either Krakow or Warsaw. But anyway, so there was some serious trauma on that side of the family.
I'll say.
And there are a number of studies showing that children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors have an elevated stress response. They have abnormal predisposition to anxiety, depression, and general heightened arousal in response to, scary kind of things like whatever it is my body was thinking was happening.
Right.
So
Which could be just stress on your body.
yeah.
The no sleep, your circadian rhythm's completely effed up, like those kinds of things.
Exactly. Right. The body doesn't really differentiate too much between emotional stress and physical stress. It's stress. There's common pathways. And so understanding this and beginning to say, oh, well, I think that I was just set up from birth to have a little bit of a heightened stress response, really allowed me to connect some dots from a generational epigenetic perspective. And it's been a deep part of my path to rewire that stress response through meditation and mind-body practices and the emotional work that, maybe not everyone has to do as intensely, but it's given me an understanding and rationale for, why for me it's been so important and helpful. And, when you look back at human history, like who doesn't have serious trauma in their family at some point, right? Like, and even if you don't know about it from the past 2 or 3 generations, almost all of us at some point have ancestors that were in wars, in situations where, stuff was real. Right?
Yeah.
So, and we know that stuff is passed on and transmitted from generation to generation. But we also know that doing the work, changing your own epigenetic response can shift some of that and create an opportunity to repattern the ancestral trauma that we might have had no control over getting passed on. But what we do have control over is the ability to recognize it and say, hey, I'd like something different for me, something different for future generations, and commit to practices and things that are known to shift epigenetic expression. Like, for example, with regular meditation, about 2,000 or 3,000 genes are known to change their expression in different directions. So it's
and those are scientific studies that that are now coming out. So again, this isn't like just saying that it's something great. It's literally proven. So
and then you look at this from a transpersonal perspective, from outside your own experience. And when you look at things like socioeconomic status and systemic racism and things like that keep people trapped in these loops of trauma and loops of difficult emotional states, that's actually holding back the entire human species, because that stuff gets passed on and that stuff just perpetuates. And so and there's some really excellent studies looking at epigenetics of social stress and that type of stuff that shows that those conditions and things really create deeply embedded health issues that, if we're thinking about health in a broader sense, it's about personal health and responsibility doing those practices, but also like trying to see how we can provide opportunities for everyone else to do that. And that's changing the food system, changing people's poverty level, all of that plays into health. And there's almost nothing that doesn't, right? That's what the epigenetic perspective says, is that all these things matter. All of the relationships we have, all of the inputs to the system, all of them contribute to the sum total of human health, both on a personal and a species-wide level.
Absolutely. And I think that, and that's why this work is so important. This is why what you're teaching, what you're coaching on, what you're bringing people through on this journey is so imperative, because it's not just about me thriving as or you thriving, but if we are thriving and we are moving towards our full potential and we're expressing, better health, true health, and we're understanding our uniqueness and how we all fit together, that this is like one big puzzle piece. We're really talking about, evolving evolving humanity to something better, because we don't feel like we're trapped and we're not victims. Rather, we're empowered to make a difference for ourselves and for anyone that's around us and anyone that counts on us. Like, for example, the fur baby that keeps popping in and out back here, we have like 4 of them, they rely on us. There are fur children, so it really, it's so much more than just health.
It is. And, I'll broaden this even further, that there was a series of studies done at UCLA a couple of years ago looking at people's happiness, where they get happiness from. And they looked at people and classified them into 2 groups. One they called the hedonic group, which means, getting happiness from pleasurable pursuits, going out with friends, partying, whatever it is that makes people happy on like a material kind of like fleeting level, which there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy all kinds of things, like
Same.
good stuff. But the other group they classified more as eudaimonic, meaning they were getting their source of predominant happiness from living their life purpose, being in alignment with whatever it was that really filled them up. And they ran a epigenetic immune profile and found that the people, and by the way, both of these groups on average rated themselves about the same happiness. They both said like, yeah, we're basically,
we're happy.
We're happy. We're good.
Yeah.
There wasn't any noticeable difference in their subjective ratings, like saying that. But what they found on a deeper epigenetic level is that the people that were living their purpose and their passion in the eudaimonic group actually had a better inflammatory profile. They had genes associated with less inflammation and better health status. And for whatever reason, our genes and our immune system is primed to respond to that. And you might even look at it, again, to kind of broaden things here, you might look at it from an evolutionary perspective in terms of what really drives evolutionary change and, broader kind of whole systems, ways of being with one another as humans. It is being in touch with what you're here to do, whatever that means.
Right.
There's a survival advantage to that, apparently, right? There's actually
it's amazing.
there's a reinforcement of that to some degree. And, again, the system is incredibly intelligent and responsive. And this is the kind of thing where, you don't need to know your genes to get in touch with your life purpose. But if you are someone that is passionate about what you're doing, you can take that again to the next level and move to the upper echelons of what's possible for you by really understanding what your genes are saying about what's right for you, and really aligning with not just your purpose and your passion, but the little daily idiosyncrasies and subtle habits that create health that add up to the sum total of, again, not just personal health, but species-wide global community health as well.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that so much. There's, I think that one of the biggest points in there that just, because it's also like, and for you, actually understanding your genes is your purpose and your purpose to help other people. And that can happen. Because, through my, my process, my evolution to find out what is going on, I have realized and connected with a piece of me, and really got into this ancestral, background that, is actually really connected to being a healer. And, that's something that I would have never thought that that was just not in my brain. I help businesses, I work in, marketing, and I do sales, and so I was always defined by, something that was so much not in this avenue but this exploration has opened up so much. And that exploration has been like, whoa, you mean there's more? Like there's more possibility for this purpose to come through me and start to feel that. And so it is all of those things. And I think that understanding ourselves on that deeper level is just, first of all, I just think that it's one word that consistently comes to mind is the empowerment that you receive from it. It's absolutely beautiful. And I love that your work and your healing journey led you into this space, because there needs to be so many of you, of this message coming into this world. It's so imperative. And you know what, now, kind of like, it's always been important, but more than ever, because the stress, the things that are taking place in the world currently are the things that we kind of we're talking about our ancestors experiencing. People, previous generations, like, oh, that stuff's never going to happen in my lifetime, kind of thing. And we're like, whoa. I think everyone's just been like a wake-up call of, you mean this can act, these crazy things can actually happen in my life? What? It's not like we go into these things knowing. So it's absolutely fascinating. Now, this is also why, like, losing weight, or getting healthier, going on it's just not that simple. Like, it's way more complex than just saying, oh, just go on the paleo diet and you'll be fine, like everything's going to be perfect. It's just not about that, right?
Well, I'll say that depending on what lens you're looking through, it can be very complex and it can be pretty simple. And what I do as a coach might seem pretty complex to people, looking at genes, understanding the physiology and the biochemistry. But I'll say most of the things that I work with my clients on doing on an actionable daily level are pretty simple. When you really look at what it takes to be healthy, there's not some magic formula that is hidden away in some secret monk's chamber in the Andes, right? There's no mystical quality to it, but it does matter. But the thing is, you can be doing the wrong simple thing, right?
Exactly.
It's about doing the right set of simple things for your body. And so, say, maybe someone has great success doing the simple action of being a vegetarian, but the other person tries that same simple thing and ends up fatigued and tired and their joints hurt and they don't know what happened.
Exactly, yeah.
And so that's where the complexity, because humans are complex, very complex. That's where understanding complexity and working with a practitioner who can see that can really help narrow down the options and prevent what I like to call supplement aisle syndrome, where you're standing at the supplement aisle and going, wow,
yes,
there's like 1,000 things here
where
that are
do
all
I
supposed to
even
be
start?
good for me. Yeah, where do I even start? I'm overwhelmed. There's so many options and I don't want to waste time, effort, or money doing something that is just going to be a waste. And so doing a genetic analysis, doing some testing, working with someone who has the skills of assessment and saying, all right, well, let's, instead of giving you 50 different things to try, let's narrow it down to 3 and track that and see what works.
Right.
And simplify things, because my goal for people is not to have a million extra things to do. And I think that that's one of the things that is kind of a myth, that in order to be healthy, in order to feel really good, you have to spend all your time doing it. Like, that's the opposite of what I want my clients to experience, and the opposite of what I want to experience. Like, I'm a health coach, but my day is not entirely based around me doing things to be healthy. Like, I have
we only have so much time.
And I have other things I want to be doing that are more important than being at the gym 6 hours a day, right?
Right.
So it's about efficiency. It's about the maximum output for the minimum input. It's actually in some ways about being lazy, and kind of like, oh wow, the health coach on the show said you should be lazy. Like, no, like, yeah, you should figure out the things where you don't have to spend all your time researching this and doing it, and come up with the efficient, simple things that work. And fortunately, genetics can be a really nice pathway to understanding that. And it's like, I like to think of it as like, okay, if there's congestion and traffic, somewhere on your route to work, wouldn't you rather have a GPS that told you to go a different way rather than just have nothing to guide you and just go blind, and then realize that, oh, I'm stuck in my traffic, and that guy next to me is smoking a cigarette, and it's fuming into my car, and now I'm coughing. Whatever it is, if you just had the GPS that could tell you, hey, just take this other route, you get there a lot quicker, a lot less energy wasted, a lot less frustration. And that's how I see genetics in terms of giving you the GPS to just match yourself up with the right route.
Totally intentional and curated. So we're basically talking Waze versus Google Maps.
Yes, and empowered, like you said, empowered to take control of your health and to live in alignment with the way that your body functions best, and empowered to change whatever predispositions that you think you might have, right? If your parents got cancer, or your parents had depression, whatever it is that quote unquote runs in the family, by understanding what the influences and triggers are that cause those genes to express, you can do the things that cause those genes not to express, and other health promoting genes to express differently. So it is a very empowering perspective.
It really is, because even if you figure out that you're dealing with something that's a lot larger than you had anticipated, i.e. what's happening right here, a lot more intricate and a lot more long, path to healing, to really getting to that. Even if that's the case, at least you understand why. And I feel like understanding why sometimes can be that thing that makes the biggest difference of not being blind, but understanding, okay, it's going to be some time before, this is going to be out of my body, whatever, but I know why. And I can keep moving forward. And you can have bad days and you can have good days, and but you're empowered in it to just, and then listening and connecting to people that understand and empathize with that journey is also really beautiful, because it can be very, we can get disenfranchised and, disempowered, and just all of those kind of that negative path. But really, it is about being in this positive light energy moving forward to really understand. So now we didn't even get into some of the other amazing things that you do for your clients, and really understanding, because I think this is just such a fascinating topic when we're also going into the conversation around the endocannabinoid system. It's very difficult to say, by the way. Try to say it 10 times fast. But let's talk about what you have coming up, and what you're building and what you're creating in your business to help empower people even further. Because you've got so many amazing things happening, and what you're offering to people that work with you.
Yeah, sure. So right now I am in the process of finally launching the endocannabinoid genetic test that I've been working on over the past couple of years with Epigenetic. And that is available now if anyone is interested in looking at genes that influence their response to cannabis and THC and CBD. I do have some testing that looks at that. And that's in the ecosystem of the other tests that look at nutrition and supplements and detox and sleep and athletic performance and hormones. And it adds another piece of the puzzle. And I'm also running a practitioner training for anyone that's a practitioner that's listening that wants to incorporate information about the endocannabinoid system, genetic precision information for their clients, and be able to provide better answers than, hey, just try it and see what happens. I have some resources. You can go to my website and check out what I have there. I'm doing some training programs and providing resources to help this information be used more readily for people. And I just really appreciate the time and chance to talk about this with you, because clearly you have an understanding of this, and I hope this really resonates with your listeners and gives them another perspective to look at their health. And, I'll say this, it's, genetics are not a silver bullet. Just knowing your genes is not going to change everything, but it does give you the opportunity to better understand your body and give you more ability to control the way you want to feel, the way you want to show up, and give you a better connection to your deepest layers. And I love what you said about sometimes it's just knowing why that matters. And, I'll do reads for people, and the intuitive things that they've already figured out, right? Like, oh, I know I feel when I do this, I feel this way. When I don't do this, I feel that way. Having a reason why for those things can be so powerful, because then you can start to make bigger connections, make meaning out of what's been happening for you in your experience. And that's really where genetics work well, is to be able to connect your experience to how your genes are expressing, to what genes are present, and really how to get what you want out of your health and out of life. And that's what I love doing with people. So if you're listening to this and any of this resonates with you, you can go to my website, david-krantz.com, and you can book a free 30-minute consultation, and we can see if we're a good fit to work together and how I can help you. And hope to help out some of your listeners here.
Yeah, this is going to resonate so much because, health has been such an integrated conversation since I started this podcast, because, it like you said, it's so important. So please, everyone, book time with David, because even if you're feeling good, even if you're like, I'm okay, like everything's fine, well, cool, but just get it more empowered and understand you and your body more, because at some point in your existence, it's going to become very clear that knowing that is going to be everything and can just mean so much to how you traverse things that come into your path. This goes into so many conversations that I've been having in my personal experiences, my personal relationships, people in their 30s getting breast cancer, these things are happening, and it's rapidly changing everything, and it's happening to people all the time. And so when you have the knowledge that you provide, you can look at this and say, and it takes the fear out a little bit. It takes, because you're understanding things at just such a different level and from a different perspective. Because that's what I would also love to see, is people not be so afraid. Like, a truck is going to come hit us at some point, and we just have to just watch it happen, right? we can have a very different perspective, I think, on our health. So
I totally agree. I think that the fear of our own bodies, the fear of our own biology is totally unwarranted. And the more we get to know ourselves and know what works for us, the less fear that we'll have around mysterious things showing up, when we're being proactive. And, like you said, for people that feel pretty good that are listening to this, I'll ask, always ask the question, like, what would it be like for you if you were able to have an extra hour of concentration and focus in your day, an extra hour of energy, a better ability to be present with the people that you love and not get distracted by your thoughts, or not run off on an emotional tangent that leaves them feeling unheard or unseen. Like, how many relationship problems actually stem from something like blood sugar dysregulation, where all of a sudden you're in a bad mood, right? It's those little things that we don't even notice that can influence our lives in ways that, if we had a little bit more conscious awareness of, or information that could shift that, our lives can change drastically just from little tweaks.
Exactly. Oh, David, this has been such an amazing conversation. thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And again, everybody, david-krantz.com. Go find him on Instagram too, at Whole Systems Health. So go follow him so you can get daily doses, but set up the consultation because I mean, your vivaciousness can really depend on knowing these kinds of things. And also we'll have an entire write-up on you, so you'll be able to connect with David directly. And again, thank you. I appreciate you, and I hope we can have further conversations and go into depth into all the other things that we could talk about, which are also so important. So maybe we'll have to make that happen soon.
Yeah, well, let's plan on it. I really enjoyed this one and would love to come back and dive a little further into the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I'll practice on being able to say the word. So it's a hard one, guys.
Practice. You gotta practice.
Like endocannabinoid. Yeah, okay, got it all. I
can only say it because I've said it 300,000 times.
Yeah, so I'll get there. Thank you again. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and please, in the meantime, if you know anyone or you want to pitch your story, please get in touch with us at disruptnowprogram.com, or you can get in touch with me on Instagram at disruptwithnatalie. Of course, all the information is on our website. Again, thank you, and in the meantime, remember, no status quo.